Today, I'm going to talk about the top 5 things I did wrong with animation. I made a lot of mistakes at the beginning of my animation journey, and frankly, I'm still making them. But each time I mess up, I get better, and I hope that with my video, you'll be able to avoid the headache and improve your animation skills. Don't make these same mistakes. Also, I want to quickly say that I won't be showing my face today since there's a lot of construction being done in our house, and it's a bit hectic. So if you hear any noises, apologies. But we're getting our heat back, which is great. Alright, back to the video. Number 1, not doing turnarounds. When I first got interested in animation, I had no idea what a turnaround was. All I knew is that I was surprised I actually liked it. I mean, drawing a bunch of images over time is incredibly tedious, but nonetheless, I love it. And if you like animation like me, you'll want to use turnarounds, which is a series of drawings of a character at all sides. If you're an animator, you don't need to just know what a character looks like at all sides, and it doesn't make you bad to not be able to do that. Even if you could animate without a turnaround, why not make it easier for yourself? Use turnarounds to help you keep your character consistent instead of using your brain to focus on what the drawing looks like or what angle you need to draw. You can think about how the character moves. Number 2, not breaking up a character. I don't remember where I learned this. It might have been from an Aaron Blaze video or when I took some SVA courses, but you need to break up your character when you animate. What I mean by this is drawing, say, a character's head on one layer, then a torso on another, then the arms, the legs, etc. Why? Conserve that brain power. You only need to focus on animating one aspect at a time until you get it perfect. I even use this on quote-unquote simpler things. By simple, I mean less limbs and things to separate. On the little fireball I animated, check out the video, it's so cute. I start by animating a circle, I add a little triangle shape that follows the circle, and then I add the fire, which was very hard, but I love it. Which is also why I used this image in my thumbnail. It was an animation card that I used for this animation in which I didn't break up my character. It was an earlier animation and it's a lot stiffer. I also didn't do another thing here, which brings me on to number 3. Squash and stretch applies to the face. When I learned animation principles, applying it to characters was a lot more confusing, especially when it came to the face. One thing I didn't realize was that squash and stretch should also be applied to the face. Stretching can be more subtle with animation, like Scavenger's Reign, or more exaggerated like Cuphead, but be sure to add it, and that especially helps when you're trying to make your characters emote. When you don't use squash and stretch, it just feels a lot more stiff. Number 4, not using storyboards and/or animatics. Another huge mistake I made when starting animations was not using storyboards or animatics. Even if it's just a quick sketch in your notepad or a nice polished digital storyboard, you need a storyboard. It's the roadmap animators use to figure out what happens next. And when I started at first and didn't use them, I animated without any sense of direction. I would animate, have an idea, show it to my sister, she would have an idea, and I would just keep going and going. I started with a simple idea, but it just kept going and I didn't know when to stop. So no matter how simple your concept, at least sketch a storyboard. And since I didn't make a storyboard, I definitely didn't make animatics. Animatics are images from the storyboard timed out, so you roughly know how each section of animation should take. Sometimes images are added, and they're also an animator's roadmap. And that brings us to number 5, not using reference. I remember hearing that Disney animators used reference, and I thought I embraced the idea, but I don't think I fully let it sink in. I remember when I was doing an animation assignment for an SVA course I took, and being incredibly frustrated with not getting the motion right. I felt especially bad because as I improved, I got a lot of compliments from my teacher, and that felt really good. I'm not saying that to brag, I'm saying that so it makes sense when I say this. I remember expressing my frustration to my teacher, Brad, sad because I thought maybe he wouldn't think I'm as great an animator anymore. And I really like Brad, he's awesome. But you know what he told me to do? Use reference. That not knowing exactly how something moves doesn't make you a bad animator. So if you're an animator struggling to get the motion right, don't feel like you just need to have this giant visual library or that you have to know exactly how something moves and should be exaggerated. With the relief that I didn't suck, I took my scarf and got my sister to record me bouncing off my parents' bed. And with some anxiety in my heart, I managed to create this animation. Alright, let's do a quick recap. Remember, use turnarounds, break up your character when you animate, use squash and stretch on your character's face, use storyboards and animatics, and use reference. I hope these tips helped you out, and if you enjoyed learning with me, consider subscribing and dropping a like. And if you want to learn more about animation and art in general, you should check out my Dimension 20 inspired design video or my Manu Mercurial post-production video. And if you want to show some extra support, consider joining my Patreon. You'll get access to high-resolution PNGs of behind-the-scene art, time-lapses of set art, your name at the end of new videos, and more. Speaking of, it's time to thank my spooky and salty patron. You help keep my stockpile of salty spectral snacks secured. With that, I will retire to my corpse-like slumber. Until next time, bye. You help keep my stockpile of salty... Speaking of, it's time to... Oh, of course, why did I give this to myself? Speaking of, it's time to thank my spooky and salty patron. You help keep my stockpile of salty spectral stack... Oh my god, why did I do this to myself? Okay. Speaking of, it's time to thank my spooky and salty patron. You help keep my stockpile of salty spectral snacks secured. Okay. Speaking of, it's time to thank my spooky, salty patron. You help keep my stockpile of oh my gosh, the first word.